Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports. I'm Brian. He's Tom. This is the NHL Interchange, and we are talking today about free agent frenzy. Thank you again for joining us here on I-80 Sports. Make sure you follow us on our website www.i80sports.com, on Twitter at I80sports_sportsNHL, and our Facebook page, the I-80 Sports Discussion Group. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing well. We had a little bit of some craziness with these signings, and yet we still have some things unresolved. Very, very interesting week. And just a sign of the times right now, we've seen this before on July 1st in the past, but I don't think we've ever seen it go this crazy, just because of the simple fact that the times that we're in right now with COVID and everything, everything's really jam-packed.
It's certainly crazy right now. It certainly seems like a flurry, and hence why we're calling this free agent frenzy today, like so many have been calling it. So definitely make sure, if you like this video, drop a like, drop a comment, and we'll be sure to connect with you guys as we go along in this crazy free agency and off season that we have right now. And make sure you follow us every Monday night on the NHL Interchange on YouTube as well. Now, getting into the off season thus far, kind of going to recap the draft as well as free agency of what we've seen so far. But before we get into that, couple tiny notes that we want to address real quick. So the commissioner of the league, Gary Bettman, announced a tentative plan to begin the 2020-2021 season on January 1st, 2021. Personally, for me, I think this is a decent move by the NHL. They're not trying to rush things. They want to see what the landscape looks like over the next few months, given the unforeseen circumstances and the current circumstances of what we are living with right now. And it also could be fun and interesting to start with the Winter Classic, an outdoor stadium jamboree to really kind of start with. Tom, what's your opinion on this?
My opinion, I do think that it is a good idea. I would have rather it started in December, but as of right now, we don't really know what's going to happen. January 1st is a good date. As far as the Winter Classic, we really don't know, because we don't know what the situation of everything is going to be at the time. The Winter Classic's great, but I mean, playing the Winter Classic in an empty stadium is not so much. It really is. I've been to 3 outdoor games myself, and it really, you really do need fans to make it happen. Watching it on TV is fun, but being there is even better. And if that's not the case, I feel like that maybe they should just have, right now you have an uneven number of teams. They should have as many games as possible on New Year's Day to open. Hopefully it gets done that way. I hope that we're not going to be in a situation where every division has to be in a hub. I'm at least hoping that we can do with what they did with baseball, what they're doing with football here, what they're doing with soccer over in Europe, where even if there are no fans, you can still have teams playing in their home markets. Like, even if the Rangers have to play in front of an empty Madison Square Garden, or the Devils have to play in front of an empty Prudential Center. And I'm hoping at the time, too, that these border restrictions between the U.S. and Canada can be relaxed, too, just to have that happen. But, I feel like that's more of a play it safe date, just because no one knows what things are going to be like on December 1st. And, that just may have been too little time to get from the end of the season to the beginning of a new season.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and fans definitely make the experience in these Winter Classic games all the better, because a lot of times these teams really do feed off the crowd, and the crowd enjoys the time, especially at the Winter Classic, especially during these outdoor games. So it would be really fun to see fans in attendance, but we also understand if it cannot happen. But we shall just see what happens as time goes on. Then moving on, we are going to talk about the NHL draft and what we saw. We hope that you got to catch our draft live stream. My voice is still recovering, Tom. I don't know about yours, but
a
little bit. So right now we want to talk briefly about our winners and losers of the draft. What did we like at the draft, and what did we kind of scratch our heads at? So I'm going to talk winners first, and then Tom will talk losers first. So to talk about winners first, I think there were 3, winners of this NHL draft. There were more than that, but there are 3 teams that I want to highlight, and I know that Tom definitely wants to highlight his main team as one of the winners of this upcoming draft, but we'll certainly get into that. I'm going to highlight mine first. So I really liked, I think at the top of the list for me is the Ottawa Senators. I think coming into this draft, having the number 3 and the number 5 and the number 28 overall pick was huge. And to have all of the potential to draft in the first and second round of a very deep draft, they hit a home run. I think getting Tim Stützle and Jake Sanderson is huge for that organization and is only going to push that rebuild window up even further. And I think Tim Stützle and Jake Sanderson have very good potential of being a top 3 forward and a top 2 defenseman, respectively. The other winners that I liked as a tie were the New Jersey Devils and the Detroit Red Wings. Now, the Red Wings, I really, really liked what they did in the first round, taking Lucas Raymond. They took the best available player at that particular point, not necessarily trying to address a need, as Steve Yzerman has done before, taking a Moritz Seider before. I predicted that they could have gone Yaroslav Askarov there. I was luckily mistaken because they went with a clearly more talented player in Lucas Raymond that I think is going to produce some really good numbers at the professional level once he comes over to America. And then also drafting William Wallander in the second round is a big win, especially since he's a first-round talent that dropped to them in the second round. So that is a big win for Steve Yzerman. And in regards to the Devils, I was really, really happy with the quality of players that were drafted. Alexander Holtz has probably the best shot in the NHL draft. Dawson Mercer is a dynamic forward who can come in and potentially be a top 6 player. And Shakir Mukhamadulla, now this defenseman kind of came with a lot of people kind of scratching their heads and saying, who? But if you did a little bit of research on him and you did a little bit of reading, did a little bit of digging, and did a little bit of video watching, you can see that this is a crash and bang defenseman. He's 6'4", and he has a lot of room to grow, and he is playing in a professional league at 18 years old, and he's thriving right now. So I think there's a lot to be excited for in Shakir Mukhamadulla as he makes a transition to the NHL, maybe in the next 3 years. I think his window is between the next 2 to 3 years, and I think the Devils will be happy to play the long game with him. I think he could be a kid that could come in and be a top 4 defenseman in this league and be a formidable foe and shut down defenseman for the Devils as well as also having good puck control in the neutral zone and at the blue line. But those are my winners. Tom, who are your winners in the draft?
Well, come on, obviously. The New York Rangers. Because they didn't screw the first pick up like a bunch of people thought they might. Or they didn't trade the first pick like a bunch of other people thought they might. But if you know the sport of hockey, they did what they were supposed to do. I wasn't, like I said, that the second pick they had with that Braden Schneider, I wasn't particularly thrilled with it, but I kind of understand why they did that. I'm going to go get away from them right now because that was just an obvious with Lafreniere, and that's just me being me. I really liked what Buffalo did with Jack Quinn. I do think that I said he was going to be a riser last week, and he really was. They did pick him, and now with a move they made yesterday, which we'll get into a little bit later, this helps Jack Quinn even more. And this helps Dylan Cousins, they drafted last year even more so. I like that they drafted Jack Quinn. He can start out now if he makes the team this year, which he may or may not. If he makes it, he can start out playing third-line minutes, not a lot of pressure, and can eventually grow into his role. Another team who I really liked, and this kind of Buffalo kind of segues into the next team I'm going to talk about, is the Minnesota Wild. Minnesota was very high on either getting that number 1 center or getting that or getting a goalie. Now, a lot of people had Minnesota penciled in to get Anton Lundell, but with all the craziness up top, with Lucas Raymond going higher than I thought he was going to go, with Sanderson and Drysdale going higher, maybe not so much Sanderson and Drysdale, but I thought one would go high and the other one would maybe go a little bit lower. They both went 5 and 6 behind each other, so that allowed Marco Rossi to fall in Minnesota's hands. And Marco Rossi, he may be a little small, but he plays like he's a big guy. He led the OHL in scoring. I think he led the entire Canadian Hockey League in scoring last year. So, I think Minnesota did really well with him and came away with a steal on Marco Rossi. I really like what they did with that.
Yeah, all in all, the winners that we addressed, they're going to be better in the long run because of these moves. And these are moves that might not be that might not make a clear impact starting this upcoming season, but next 2 to 3, 4 years down the line, we could be looking back and saying, this was the turning point for this franchise, or this is when, the rebuild stopped and the road to contention began. And that can certainly be for any of the teams that we mentioned right now. But there is also the opposite conversation when it comes to draft winners, as we also address draft losers. So, Tom, I'll let you start in this topic. Who were some people that, maybe missed the mark at the draft?
I'm going to go with two teams, two obvious teams right now. Two teams who have a lot of talent up front, but don't have a lot of talent in the back. And that's the Edmonton Oilers and the Toronto Maple Leafs. They both had Caden Goulet on the board. Now, Caden Goulet, I don't know if he's going to be a number one defenseman. I don't know if he's going to run your power play. I don't know if he's going to be a Norris Trophy candidate. But the guy plays in the WHL. He's a hard-nosed kid. Edmonton had the chance to take him, and Toronto had the chance to take him. Edmonton, I don't know what in the world they were thinking taking Dylan Holloway. Holloway has not shown anything yet in college. He was not even at a point per game last year. I don't know what the obsession with Holloway is with them. I don't know what they needed him for. And the same thing with Toronto. Toronto took Amarov. Now, Toronto, I can understand a little bit more why they took a forward instead of a defenseman, because I've been reading William Nylander's name in the trade rumors, and I've also been reading they're still connected to Pietrangelo, who no one knows where he's going yet. As of last night, everyone thought he was going to Vegas, but nothing came of it. So that Pietrangelo effect may still be in Toronto's ballpark, and maybe because that's the fact, they may be trading Nylander, so you can maybe bring Amarov over in order to replace Nylander. That might be what's going to happen. We don't know that. But both of those teams needed help on the back end. You had a defenseman sitting right there, Western Hockey League, hard-nosed defenseman, and they both passed on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think Toronto still gets good value in Amarov. I really do see the value in Rodion Amirov. I think he can be a good forward once he transfers over to the American game. But it is true. They needed to address a necessity here at this pick for the future, and to have a couple of defensive prospects sitting there, not just Caden Goulet, but also have Braden Schneider there as well. And to pass up on that, that's tough. This is one of those things where I think Toronto needs to consider maybe taking some of their prospect pool and seeing what they can get for immediate defensive help later on. But that's also a conversation once we get more into the offseason moves as well. My losers are all three teams that did not pick in the first round, and two of which are the Islanders and the Bruins. And then the real loser in this situation, I feel, is the Arizona Coyotes. Now, all three teams were playoff teams. We're not knocking anything about their ability right now. But not having picks until the third round in a deep draft like this hurts. Arizona is an absolute mess right now, and a heavy cleanup needs to be done across the board. Whether it's your current lineup, whether it's your prospect pool, there's a lot that needs to be addressed in Arizona, and there's a lot of cleanup to come for Arizona. So far, they're one of the bigger losers of the entire offseason. They were a team that was trying very hard to trade Taylor Hall's rights to get back into the first round, get back into the second round. They tried desperately to make a couple moves to get back into the first round of this draft, and they fell flat on their face. No team wants to deal with them right now, that is a big concern, that no team wants to do business with them at the moment. That is a big red flag. And I think Arizona has a lot to kind of pick up. They have a mad captain right now in Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and you're going to have to address that sooner rather than later, because he gave them a deadline of, I either want to be dealt to Boston or I want to be dealt to Vancouver. That deadline passes, so he's going to stay in Arizona for now. But it's a concern going forward, and you need to try to keep him happy. So there needs to be some moves that happen later on, and not addressing it in the draft hurts. Now, in regards to the Islanders and the Bruins, it doesn't hurt them as much, But I think what we're going to see in terms of longevity in the playoff picture, I think it does hurt Boston and New York, because this is a team. These are both teams that are not getting younger right now, and they really don't have much in the prospect pool. So a draft like this that was probably one of the deepest in the past decade hurts not to get into those first 2 rounds and capitalize on that talent. I mean, we'll see. We've been wrong before in terms of, talent. Talent comes from any round. And it hurts right now unless they can develop them later. Moving on to our final topic of the evening, we are going to be addressing NHL free agency, trades, the entire frenzy that has been this past week. And if you've been living under a rock, there is a lot that has happened this last week. Now, if you follow Tom and I on I-80 Sports Discussion Group on Facebook, you'll see that we've been quite active over the past weekend, tracking everything that's been going on, all the rumblings, all the goings-ons with NHL free agency, which if you don't follow us on Facebook right now, please make sure you do. And also follow us on Twitter, because we also break stuff down on Twitter as well. So we're not going to go into every single team, obviously, but like the draft, we're going to talk about our winners and our losers. I've got quite a bit to say in terms of losers, so I'm probably going to go last on the loser side of things, but we're going to address winners and losers. Obviously, we're going to start with the good first. So, Tom, I'm going to let you take it away with the current winners of this NHL offseason.
You know what? I kind of liked what Boston did a little bit with Craig Smith. I didn't realize it at the time. I was looking up his stats earlier today. They got some pretty good value there for a second-line right winger, a guy who pots about 20 to 25 every year. He'll look nice on that right side with David Krejci, and that was maybe the thing. That was maybe a concern with Boston this year. Even when they were really running over teams beginning of the year, the biggest thing was that once you got past that first line, there was a lot to worry about. It's nice. You add 20 goals to your second line right now. That really does help them out. I don't know if their window is particularly closed yet, but I know they don't have much time yet either. They're not a young group. But this guy brings in a little bit of youth, and he brings in 20 goals on the second line. I really like what they did. I also like what St. Louis did and bringing Torrey Krug in. Nice little value replacement for Pietrangelo. It's obvious now Pietrangelo will not be back there. And I also like what Colorado did with bringing in They brought in Brandon Saad for some forward depth, and they brought in Zadorov, and they brought in Devin Taves today from the Islanders for some more depth. And I really, really do think that Joe Sakic is going all out right now to win the Cup next year. I really do think when all is said and done, I got to think your Cup favorite next year is Colorado. I really do. Just with what they've done in the draft and what they've done in free agency, they just seem to be doing right in every category. You have one team where, okay, they do great with trades and free agents, but their prospect pool is terrible, or their prospect pool is great, but they don't have anybody to help them now. Colorado has guys to help them now, and they have one of the better prospect pools in the league. I mean, I really, really think Colorado is going all out, but they're doing it the right way. And Joe Sakic is really they always say that the best players don't always make the best managers. Well, Joe Sakic is bucking that trend right now because he's really set a nice thing up out there, and I'm curious to see when next year starts and when next year ends, where they will be, because I think they got a really good thing going on out there.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think those removes of a potential Stanley Cup contender and certainly Stanley Cup favorite, adding Brandon Saad, I think as a, bottom six, maybe he plays on the third line. That's probably where I have him slotted right now. But even then,
I was wrong on one thing though. Zadorov, they got rid of Zadorov. I'm sorry.
Yes,
they got rid of him.
Right.
They got rid of him.
Yep, Nikita Zadorov was and this was a move that needed to be made by Colorado. They were either going to trade Ian Cole, Nikita Zadorov, or Ryan Graves, because they needed to make room for Bowen Byram, who's going to be probably taking on NHL minutes starting this year. And for those who might not know, Bowen Byram is their top prospect, who they drafted last year at number 4 overall in the NHL draft. And he's more than likely ready for NHL minutes at this point, hence the necessity to trade either Ian Cole, Nikita Zadorov, or Ryan Graves. They ended up re-signing Ryan Graves. So we see exactly the route that they took. They ended up using Nikita Zadorov in a trade with Chicago to get Brandon Saad and another piece, and I think it absolutely helps them. My winners, it's funny because I have kind of like a 2-2 where I have two teams that are not going to be contenders, but I love what they've done so far. And I have two teams that I think are really trying to contend. So the first two that are not on the contention side of things, actually kind of deja vu from our draft talk, the New Jersey Devils and the Ottawa Senators. So I really, really like what they've done this offseason. The Devils, Tom Fitzgerald was very smart in calling a couple teams like, hey, you need help with cap. Here's what I'm willing to give up. What will you do? So just by doing that, he, parlayed a trade with the Columbus Blue Jackets, getting Ryan Murray for a 5th-round pick next year. And Ryan Murray instantly slots in as your number one left-handed defenseman on that team, pairing with either PK Subban or Damon Severson, which if you're a Devils fan, you should be excited for that, especially in the new Lindy Ruff system. That could be great. Then they also acquired Andreas Janssen from Toronto for Joey Anderson. Losing Joey Anderson hurts a little bit, but picking up Andreas Janssen as a potential top 6 guy, you're happy, especially because Toronto needed cap relief. And also picking up Corey Crawford is huge. And to get him on a short-term deal, one thing I wanted to address was a lot of people kind of mentioning like, wow, a lot of 2-year deals. And the explanation behind a lot of these 2-year or 3-year deals, obviously it's not just the current scope of the world of like the uncertainty of where things are going right now, but also you have a team that's going to be coming into the league next year in the Seattle Kraken, and there's going to be an expansion draft next year. So you take on a 2-year contract in the hopes that maybe instead of Seattle trying to poach a younger player that you're trying to protect, taking that more desirable lower term player that you just signed in this free agency, a la maybe Braden Holtby with Vancouver, and trying to protect Thatcher Demko could be a thing that happens. But that's just a little side note. In terms of Ottawa, I really, really like what they've done so far as well. Picking up Austin Watson. What else did they do here? I've got it on my little list here. They acquired Matt Murray as their starting goaltender, which was huge. Also picking up Erica Branson to give a little bit of veteran presence on their young defense. These are really, really good, solid moves for a growing team. And I think they're not going to be contenders next year, but they're already immediately better on paper and moves up that rebuild process even more. And there's a lot to be excited for these teams. Last two teams, Calgary and Montreal, they made moves that they are going for the cup. They are going as hard as they can. Calgary picking up Jacob Markstrom is huge because it gives them a more valid goaltender between the pipes than David Riddick. And also picking up Chris Tanev on their defense gives them a very, very solid defenseman in their top 4, which they also needed to address. And then lastly, with Montreal, how could you not be happy picking up Josh Anderson and Tyler Toffoli? You needed scoring help badly. And picking up Josh Anderson and Tyler Toffoli, those are really, really good moves. Yeah, you sacrifice a Max Domi, but I think Josh Anderson in the long term is going to be a better scoring option for them. There's still a little bit of concern in their older defense, older goaltending, but if there was ever a time to try to go for the cup now, this is now for Montreal. Honorable mention also goes to Toronto because I also really like the moves that they made to try to get grittier. And boy, oh boy, they needed it also. They needed to get grittier badly, as they showed in with Columbus. Now we're going to move on to our losers. Tom, I'll let you start on the losing side of things. Who is your losers of the offseason so far?
You know what? I'm going to piggyback off what you just said about Montreal. I don't think they were winners in this. I really don't. They brought Josh Anderson in, who, I mean, he's a decent player, but is Josh Anderson going to really win you a Stanley Cup? Tyler Toffoli going to really win you a Stanley Cup? Toffoli was more of a depth guy in Vancouver. Anderson, I'm looking at his stats, he's been okay. His career high is 27 goals, but you're playing in a division also where you have your defending Stanley Cup champions in the Tampa Bay Lightning. You have Boston, who just brought Craig Smith in, who, like I said before, is going to add 20 goals into that lineup and is going to be a solid second line option on the right wing. You have Toronto, who, they've been of concern over the past years, but, they're still a halfway decent team. And you have Florida over there as well. Florida, who, if they ever put it together, should be a good team. And now you have Buffalo, who just brought in Taylor Hall. So now you have Taylor Hall and Jack Eichel on that first line in Buffalo. I mean, I guess Montreal tried to get better, but if it were me, I would have kept Max Domi over Josh Anderson. Foley was a decent signing, but I don't know. I don't think Montreal gets any better from these moves that they made. I'm sorry, I just don't think they do. Obviously, I mean, the obvious loser was Arizona, just with all the problems they're having there. We're not going to go into that, but we pretty much know. I mean, it's a given what's going on over there. Trying to think who else here. I had another one in my head. It slipped my mind. I mean, yeah, it's really those two that stand out right now. Like I said, there's still a lot left. Like, we don't know where Pietrangelo is going to go. You know, Vegas may make a move or two if they get him or they don't. I had another one here, and I'm literally slipped my mind, and I'm trying to find it, and I'm going crazy over it. You know, Chicago. I guess you could consider Chicago too, kind of. I mean, I don't know if you consider them a loser or not. Chicago is another team that's kind of just. It's kind of like Montreal. They're kind of like tires, tires stuck in the mud right now. It's like they're moving, but are they going anywhere? You know, Chicago too. You can make an argument for them too. An arguable one that people will say is Vancouver because they had lost Markstrom. But what people don't realize is that Holtby's only 31 years old. So I guess Vancouver could be 50-50 with being a loser right now. You lost Markstrom to Calgary, yes, but you also brought in Braden Holtby. Holtby can still give you maybe 3 or 4 good years left. So Vancouver is iffy, but I mean, I do think losing to Foley might hurt them a little bit, but we shall see with Vancouver. They also still have that kid Podkolzin over in Russia, and maybe they want to bring him over this year. You know, he's a guy that not a lot of people are talking about, and he was a guy that last year, just because of the KHL transfer agreement in himself, if there was no KHL transfer agreement, a lot of people were saying that he would have gone number 3 in the 19 draft behind Hughes and Kakko. So that might also be a reason why they let Toffoli walk. But stranger things have happened. Vancouver, I don't want to call them a loser, but I don't want to call them a winner. They're kind of a 50-50, but definitely my loser. Chicago, Arizona, obviously. So, yeah, those two definitely. Forgot who I mentioned before. I'm going crazy.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from in terms of Vancouver, where
Montreal. That's what I said.
Okay, yeah. So I get where you're coming from for Vancouver. I think it's a bit of a win getting Braden Holtby because, especially on a shorter term, because if you can convince Seattle to take Holtby in there and expose him instead of exposing Thatcher Demko, I think that's huge for Vancouver to protect that Thatcher Demko at all costs. I mean, no matter what, they would have found a way to do so, but picking up Braden Holtby as a good tandem for both, I think is ultimately a good move for this organization. Now, getting into my losers, I've got quite a bit to talk about on this one. So to me, there are 3 key losers here: Columbus, Vegas, Florida. And I'm going to go over why. And because a couple of them, you might be scratching your head like, well, maybe not really, but let me explain. So Columbus, first and foremost, they dumped salary for almost no reason at this point. Unless moves are coming, which at this point, it doesn't look very likely that we could see anything interesting happening. There's really nothing amazing coming. Yeah, picking up Max Domi is a win. It helps. It absolutely helps their top 6 core. But they dumped Ryan Murray and Nudavara for nothing. Their defense is significantly weaker because of this, and the hope was they would be able to add a top talent for the blue line. They didn't add Pietrangelo. They didn't add Krug, which is exactly what fans were kind of hoping for. They did none of that. If you're a Columbus fan, you're probably mad right now at seeing Murray go for only a 5th-round pick. Meanwhile, he was a former 2nd overall pick. You're probably mad for Nudavara going. And, all right, getting Cliff Poo back is okay, but, there's still, that's it? Nudavara is a decent defenseman. And honestly, I think right now, unless they find a way to get one of these remaining forwards, which there are some forwards still left over in free agency, I don't see how they're any better on paper right now. And this is a team that beat Toronto, earned their way into the playoffs, and gave an eventual Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning a run for their money in the first round. After everything that's happened this week, I doubt that they can do that again next season, though I've doubted John Tortorella teams in the past, and it's come back to bite me. Next, Vegas. Okay, you might be wondering, well, if they sign Alex Pietrangelo, that's a win, right? Yeah, but not how they're going about it at the moment. The front office has managed to piss off the entire team by trying to trade Nate Schmidt to Florida. Schmidt would not waive his no-trade clause to go there, and he's not only a locker room leader, but a fan favorite player in Vegas. He is one of the most, prized possessions right now in Vegas amongst their fans. Yes, adding Pietrangelo makes them a cup contender instantly next year. There's no doubt about it. But only if the rest of the team is on board with what they're trying to do and the moves that they're trying to make. You have to have the team buy in. Lastly, Florida. I'm sorry, but I don't understand overpaying Radko Gudas during the first hour of free agency. I don't understand it. This is a team that doesn't have a lot of cap space to begin with, and they desperately added defensive depth short-sightedly. They're signing him the top 4 money when he's not a top 4 defenseman anymore, if he was to begin with, that is. He takes way too many bad penalties, and he has no use as an enforcer anymore. Now, yes, for your analytic darlings, you might be saying, well, his Corsi rating, he has one of the better Corsi ratings amongst defensemen. That's all well and good if he can actually stay on the ice to do so, which at the moment, he has one of the worst track records for penalties, for taking penalties amongst defensemen. That being said, I like them getting Nudavara. I think that does help their defense for the future. But after that, that's about it. If they manage to re-sign Hoffman or Dadonov, I'll consider bumping them off my loser list. But for right now, I don't like the Wenberg signing. The Verhaeghe signing is okay, but there's nothing that has made this team better, in my opinion. Tom, do you have any rebuttal on that?
My rebuttal, I'm happy Wenberg went there as a Ranger fan. A lot of Ranger fans were talking like, we want Wenberg, we want Wenberg. I said, stay away from this guy. He's only scored 14 goals. His career high is 13 goals. Vegas, I don't know. Now, Vegas, like, one of two things can happen here. If they do get Pietrangelo, my prediction with this is that they're going to give him the captaincy, I think. They have never named a captain yet in their history, which has only been, 3 seasons now. But they're going to give him the captaincy. Now, my question is that going to be a negative or is that going to be a positive for the Golden Knights? You have this guy coming in who didn't fight the wars with them, who wasn't in the battle with them. Now, all of a sudden, you're giving him the same. And I'm wondering right now what's going to happen out there if they get him. Now, if he doesn't go there, then it doesn't matter. But it's a thought that's been going through my head. As soon as I read yesterday that there was a rumor that they signed him yesterday, obviously it was rebuffed. But it's something to think about that if he does go there, what's going to happen if they do put that C on his jersey? Is there going to be a total mutiny in the locker room, or is it going to blow the team apart because now they finally have a experience? I mean, these guys are experienced, but now they have an experienced leader who's won the cup, a guy who's played for Team Canada, has been in those Olympics, has been in those World Cups. It's just something to think about.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And there's a lot of question marks right now, not only with Vegas, but for the rest of these teams in the NHL, which we'll be covering over the course of these next few weeks because the offseason is going to be relatively long, even though it's going to feel like it's short because it's not going to be insanely long. But for those of you that might be wondering, well, you didn't cover this signing, you didn't cover this signing. Well, don't worry, because we will be covering more, especially next week. But then especially once we get into our division previews, that's where the real talk is going to be coming in terms of who went where, what did teams lose. So don't worry if we didn't necessarily cover your favorite team today. We're going to be covering every single team coming up, leading up to the beginning of this regular season, if it begins on January 1st or if it begins at another time. But until then, make sure that you follow us on our website at iadsports.com, on our Twitter at iad_sportsnhl, and on our Facebook page, the IAD Sports Discussion Group. And you can catch us every Monday night for your weekly NHL Interchange fix. I've been Brian. He's been Tom. Free agency is continuing, and we'll have more for you guys next week. Catch you later.